Outreach Coordinator here at Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this virtual format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I have the pleasure of introducing our parenting series event this evening, and I'm delighted to welcome our guests, Dr. Michaeleen Doucleff and Julie Lithcott-Hames. You can click the link that we're going to drop into the chat box in a minute here to get your own copy of Michaeleen's new book, Hunt, Gather, and Parent, and Julie's book, How to Raise an Adult. If you have a question for Michaeleen or Julie, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. We do ask that questions are related to the books or topics brought up during the event. As always, thank you for your kindness and positive engagement while joining us today. At the end of the chat, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also upvote the questions you like and want most answered. Now on to the event you're waiting for. Dr. Michaeleen Doucleff is a reporter for NPR Science Desk and the global health and development blog, Goats and Soda. Prior to joining NPR, Doucleff was an editor at the journal Cell, where she wrote about the science behind pop culture. She has a doctorate in chemistry from the University of California, Berkeley, and a master's degree in viticulture and enology from the University of California, Davis. She lives with her husband, daughter, and German Shepherd Mango in San Francisco. In conversation with Michaeleen tonight is Julie Lithcott-Hames. She's the best-selling author of the anti-helicopter parenting manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her TED Talk on the subject has more than 5 million views, and in 2020, she became a regular contributor with CBS This Morning on parenting. Julie is a former corporate lawyer and a Stanford dean, serves on the board of Common Sense Media, and on the advisory board of leanin.org. She lives in San Francisco Bay Area with her partner of over 30 years, their young adults, and her mother. It is my pleasure to turn the event over to them. Enjoy.
Heidi, Margaret, everybody at Politics and Prose, thank you so much for being so integral to the lifeblood of the Washington, D.C. community, so integral to the life and well-being of authors and readers everywhere. I wish I could be there in person. I'm here in Palo Alto, California, where it's just after 4. And I'm truly honored to get to be a part of Michaeleen Doucleff's book tour for her truly earth-shattering, groundbreaking, essential read, Hunt, Gather, Parent. Michaeleen, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Rosy. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you and Politics and Prose. Really is. Thank you.
You know, you emailed me months ago to ask if I might blurb this book, as we authors do for one another. And just seeing the title, Hunt, Gather, Parent, and reading the 2 sentences that came in the email description, I said, oh my goodness, this is the parenting book I've been waiting for. I wrote a book on what we were doing wrong, all of this overparenting, all of this micromanagement of kids, all this incessant worry and praise and telling them what they had to do and micromanaging their every moment. And kids have fewer skills than they used to have and greater mental health troubles, higher rates of anxiety and depression, less executive function. And I talked about what we were doing wrong and how we got here. But in your book, you talk about how we can get it right. Your book, I think, offers a total reset. Anybody who's raising a child in the US today, who's in a community where it's all about micromanaging your kids every moment, you absolutely need to drop everything right now and order this book as we proceed with our conversation. So I had a lot of hopes for this book. I said, yes, I would agree to read an early copy. I still have my early copy sitting right here. And this book did not disappoint. So let's jump right in. I want to set the stage. You're a correspondent with NPR. You're a scientist. You have chemistry degrees, viticulture degrees, oenology degrees. You're like this scientist, yes, researcher, explorer, and you're a mom. And at the time you wrote this book, brand new-ish mom, yes, to Rosy, who is now 5, but was really quite a toddler when you went on this exploration. And there was something in you, seemingly both the scientist and the mom and the journalist, of course, that said, you know what? Something isn't right about what I'm doing or what I'm seeing by way of parenting in my own community. I have a sense that other places have gotten it right. Maybe I've reported on those spaces, and I'm going to strap my daughter on my back and go visit a Mayan, Inuit, and Hadzabe, is that the right pronunciation?
Yes, Hadzabe.
Community
yes, that's
in
right.
Tanzania, because those folks seem to be getting it right and I need to go investigate. So give us a sense of which of these identities, scientist, mom, journalist, motivated you to go do this? What was the dominant why behind the need to pursue this question?
I think it was the mom. I actually think that the scientists had to shut down a little bit because, so much of the advice that we hear today is like science-based or quote unquote science-based, but it really wasn't working. Like it was, a lot of times it was like backfiring. And when I went and looked at like actually what the science was behind a lot of the stuff, I was really disappointed. All the like red flags of my scientist brain were like, a lot of this is not reproducible. A lot of this is not, really backed. The studies weren't good. So I think it was really the mom in me that once I, as a correspondent at NPR, I was traveling a lot. And before I was a parent, and, I spent some time in Liberia during the Ebola outbreak, and I spent some time up in the Arctic before. And, I think becoming a parent made me see these trips differently because I was just kind of desperate for help. I was kind of like, Rosy's an amazing kid, but like you said, she was quite a baby. She's quite a toddler. She had a lot of tantrums. There was a lot of hitting of me. I'd pick her up and she'd like smack me across the face. And everything that I was doing seemed to be making it worse. And, we were just kind of in this like deadlock power struggle with a 2-year-old, with a 3-year-old. And then when I went for a reporting trip with NPR to the small Maya village, I just saw the opposite, Julie. I just saw parents that were getting along with their children. There was no yelling. Very little like bickering or arguing, very little resistance. And I remember I recorded it. I was taken back. I was like, and yet the children were very good, right? They were very kind and very generous and very helpful. And I just thought, just sitting there, like when I was going home, I just thought, I don't think I've ever been taught to be like a good mom. I mean, that sounds crazy, but I felt that way. I was like, I don't think my culture is teaching me the skills I need to be like as good of a parent as I can be. And that's really what Hunt Gather Parent is about, is like trying to find those skills and use them here, and and I wasn't disappointed. What I learned has been amazing for our family.
So it doesn't sound crazy at all. You've got a little one. My kids are 21 and 19. I've struggled with the same things. You have different struggles, but similar. Like I didn't have my kids hitting me, but I could see that my parenting style wasn't necessarily leading to the kind of skills I was hoping my kids would develop, like being able to cut their own food. I was one of those overhelper types. And so none of us should feel badly. I think that if we're raising kids in this American environment where we haven't been taught, you said it sounds, can't quite remember how you put it, but you're like, I haven't been taught. Does that sound weird? No, as you point out in your book, we have lost that culture of it takes a village to raise children. We don't have generations of older people looking out for each new child that arises, and we're doing it often in a vacuum. And so let's none of us beat ourselves up for why it has come to this, but let us grab the book that is the guide to the right way. So you had experience in this particular Mayan village. There was something there that made you say, you know what? That looks a whole lot better, more inviting, more lovely than I've got going on in my own home. Where? Yeah. San Francisco, right?
Yes, San Francisco. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're like an hour apart.
We're very close. Yes.
Right? We're very close. And you said, let me not just stop with this particular Mayan community that I've been introduced to. Now this is presumably the scientist saying, I need to kind of not do a double blind study, but I need some other examples, some other data points. So tell us who else you chose and why in the aggregate, these three form the basis of your comparison and contrast with what we've got going on here.
Yeah. And so actually I had been up to the Arctic before and I had remembered that actually what I saw the parents up there were very similar style. And actually I went back about 6 months, 9 months after the Yucatan trip. I went back up to the Arctic in the middle of the winter, and it just reinforced this idea of like, it wasn't exactly the same parenting, but there was these kind of elements of it that echoed from what I saw in the Yucatan. And I very calm, confident. I this word is so important. Like, it's calm. The parenting is calm, but it's confident. It's raising these very respectful, generous, helpful children. And so when I got back from that trip, that's where the scientist in me was like, wait a second. These are two very, very distinct cultures that have been separated for thousands of years. If there's this common element, is it somewhere else? And so I started reading and finding like it's everywhere. You can find what's in How to Gather Parent, you can find on every livable continent. And actually, one of my friends who raised her kids in Eastern Europe, Albania, she was telling me about how she saw lots of elements there that are in this book. So this is something that's likely very old because it's so common, but it's likely something parents have turned to over and over again. And so I actually chose the Hadzabe. So I chose the Hadzabe because they are an incredible culture. They have likely lived in the part of Tanzania where they are for thousands of years. And this is so key. Like, they have valued their culture so much that they have preserved a lot of it. So it's not because they can't, acquire technologies or change, but they say what we do is right. What we do is so good that we don't need to change a lot of it. And so that changed my whole way of thinking about, especially with parenting, right? That like maybe the newest thing isn't always the best, right?
Yeah.
So we spent some time there, and also their kids, and the parents and the Hadzabe parents have written about this. They raise incredibly confident, self-sufficient kids. So by the age of 5, these kids are helping with the other children. They are voluntarily foraging for food, really contributing to the family. And so they don't struggle with this confidence, anxiety, and stress that American families often struggle with. So that's why we went there. And we went to the Arctic because these kids, they are masters at raising emotionally mature children. It's very striking how kind and calm and generous the kids are up there. Again, it's something that we tend to struggle with. And then the Mayan kid, like the Maya culture, and lots has been written about this research wise, are masters at motivating children to be helpful, and contribute to the family. And, in all of these places, it's about teaching children to be good family citizens, good community citizens. And that's really what I think it boils down to.
I think you quote the Mayan word or the Spanish word acomedido.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. I want you to I know everyone on the call, we're close to 60 people. Everyone's eager for like, tell me the answer. How do I get my kid to stop hitting his brother? How do I get my kid to cooperate? You found 3 communities, cultures, societies in which children emerge more helpful, more skilled, calmer, kinder, and confident. Who wouldn't want that? Okay. Yes, we're going to get to that. But first, I think there's a really important topic that must not be missed. And that really has to form it's part of the fabric of this work that you're doing, ethics.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Western societies, American societies, not a great track record of interactions with indigenous communities.
Yes.
We have a bad history around exploring, exploiting, exotifying cultures not like ours. We have exhibited as Americans, not you, but in general, scientists from America, anthropologists, et cetera, have exhibited a radical cultural misunderstanding or misappreciation. So ethically, I want to know, here you are, you're like, I got a problem in my house. I think I can fix it with the Mayans, the Hadzabians and the Inuit, perhaps. Let me go study them. How do you make your way in ethically? How did you attain those permissions? How did you develop that cultural competency such that you were not replicating these historical wrongs? And secondarily, if I may add a little compound to this question, you became the subject ultimately of this book. Like, this book is as much about you and your kid as it is about any learnings, that were going on thanks to what these particular communities were offering you. And I wonder what the ethics associated with that are for you as a journalist. So that may be too big a question. Pick one and I'll come back with the other if you didn't hit it. Yeah.
I mean, I think the first question is on my mind at every moment, right? That the history is there, and it's something I feel, and I feel the whole time. I think it's all about, coming in and trying to, it's all about collaboration, right? That at every moment, this was about collaborating with these families and, just being upfront, like I'm doing this research and I'm trying to learn. And will you help me learn? And, this is what's going to happen to it. And, a big part I'm going to say is a third of my advance from this book is going back to these communities. And that's a big part of it, right? I wanted to like give back because they have given, families in these places have given me something incredible. And so, and I wanted to give back. So I think it's a lot about collaboration, right? And making sure every step of the way is about collaboration. And then second, about giving back and not making it a one way when it comes to the gifts, right? I talk a lot about in the book about this idea of shared responsibility, that we think a lot about things as transactional, like I give you this and you give me that. Whereas what I'm talking about in the book is setting up a relationship that's a shared responsibility, that when I give you something, that sets up a relationship where we're going to give back to each other in this circular way, and it's not transactional. And so that's what we've created a relationship with the families in the book. One of the families, she's in my phone. I stalked to her. She is my friend and she knows, her name's Elizabeth, and she knows she saw how I was struggling and she volunteered to help me, so does that answer your question?
It does, absolutely. And I think that's where the bleed starts to happen, because it's in a beautiful way. I think, this is a book that is deeply researched. It is a terrific piece of very long form journalism. And it's got all of this personal narrative woven in. And I think, however compelling a description of this particular Mayan village or the Inuit village or the Hadzabe village might have been, sort of explicating this is what they do and here's how their children are and information. I think the hinge is really, and my parenting changed while I was there. They were noticing Rosy and me and daring to give me feedback. That's what I mean by you sort of become the subject. You almost become the focus of their curiosity.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's go there. Let's go there. Because I think that's the lessons you learned and plowed into this terrain you were trotting with your own child. That's, I think, the best way for listeners to appreciate the wisdom that is in this book. So why don't you pick, I don't know, 3 things, maybe one from each community or however you want to structure it. But we can't cover the entire gist of the book. We're just trying to make sure people buy it and ingest it and enjoy it and read it and change your lives and your kids' life as a result. But so give us that overview. These turn out to be the massive differences between how you thought you were supposed to do things here in the San Francisco Bay Area, United States more broadly, versus what you learned from being in community with these other folks.
I mean, the Arctic stands out the most, I think, because especially when we first got there, it was embarrassing to me. I mean, I was embarrassed because it was very clear that I didn't know how to handle Rosy. Rosy was having tantrums in the grocery store. Rosy was having tantrums on the road. And she was really the only person that was having tantrums, and they could tell that I didn't know what to do. And, like I read in the book, they could hear me yelling at her and scolding her, and what they showed me, nobody ever made me feel ashamed. In fact, the first couple of days we would be walking around and a woman ran out of her house and said, "I see you here with your child by yourself." And a lot of parents couldn't believe that I was by myself with this child, and nobody was there helping me. And they were like, you need help. You can't do this on your own. Let me take her. And there was just this very, very big sense of I want to help you. But what the big difference was how I was treating Rosy when she misbehaved. So I was coming at Rosy as my mom did, or as I thought I was supposed to, with a lot of words, a lot of, what's wrong? Do you need this? Please stop crying. Please stop doing this. Why are you doing this? Just this very high energy, lots of words, state. And Elizabeth Tugumiak, she was our interpreter. One time, Rosy, it was late at night, but the sun was still up because we were above the Arctic Circle, and Rosy was tired and she laid down in the road and started having a tantrum. And I ran over to her and was about ready to do my spiel, like, what's wrong? You got to get up. You can't stop. Why? What are you doing? Just screaming. And Elizabeth walks over to her, and I'll never forget it. She kind of kneels down and she says to her, Rosemary, do you see the beautiful sunset? And I'm not even doing it justice. It's much calmer. It's like, Rosemary, do you see the beautiful sunset, the purple and the blue? And she just came at her like she was this like incredibly gentle being that the calmest, sweetest voice I had ever heard Elizabeth have. And all of Rosy's like fire in her belly and all her like angst it just melted away. It was incredible. And Rosy kind of looked up at her and was like, yes, and I just thought, like, in that moment, and there was one moment in the grocery store that was similar, that like, wow, I am just coming at these tantrums and misbehavior and like the whole opposite way that needs to be done. And they never told me not to yell. I mean, I asked many elders and we interviewed many people, and the number one rule was never yell at a child, but they never directly, reprimanded me. So it was, they were very, very polite. But yes, I think I was a sight for them. At one point, Rosy, we were interviewing people and Rosy was swinging the microphone around and I was like, Rosy, stop. What are you doing? Stop. And then she settled down a little bit and Elizabeth said to me, just ignore her. Just ignore her. Leave her alone. Like, it was very firm. And I thought I was ignoring her, Julie. To be honest, I thought I was ignoring her because but I wasn't. I was engaging with her with looks and commands and in the Hadzabe, I was the joke. They were, I was like, I mean, they had made lots of jokes about me and they gave me a name. It means which means wait a bit. And it's because when we went out into the savannah hunting, my sweater kept getting caught on thorns and they just kept saying, you need to wait a bit, but and then you'll get unstuck. But what I realized being there was because I needed to wait a bit before I said things to Rosy, that I was interfering too quickly and too much. And that if I just wait a bit, like, she'll work herself out. She'll figure it out herself. And so that has really stuck that with my parenting, that, if I feel the need to interfere, it's like, wait a bit, just wait a bit and pause for a moment and things will work themselves out.
For anyone who joined us a few minutes late, just Michaeleen, tell us how old Rosy is and how old she was when she was on this journey to investigate parenting with you.
She's 5 now, and when we traveled, she was 3. So
yeah. So traveling around the world to 3 different continents with a 3-year-old, and you talk in the book about strapping her on your back. I really pictured you with one of those big camping, those backpacks that you can put a child in, right? Okay. All right. So it sounds like, this beautiful lesson about speaking calmly to a child who's having a tantrum is the way to help the child regulate their emotions and get out of that tantrum, which is in stark contrast to what a lot of us learned about. We need to be strong. We need to be firm. We need to be reprimanding them. We need to scold them. And you clearly learned that's not the way forward. Can you tell us science-wise in a nutshell what's going on there for a child and why what we are doing doesn't work, but why the calm, kind approach does?
Yeah, I think it's 2 major things. Like, one, I think it's psychologists and neuroscientists, have documented how children's emotions mirror ours, right? And so they have this set of circuitry that mirrors what we do. And so if you come at a child who's super high energy, with really high energy, the child's just going to go up and up and up and up, right? But if you come at a high energy child that's stress, like a tantrum is stress, with, the calmest, most, like, it's like a calmness that I didn't really have before, but it is like, I'm here. And most of the time they say nothing. Like, one of the Hadzabe moms, this little toddler was having a tantrum and she just stood there and put her hand out to him like this. Like, it was just, was the most gentlest thing. It was not ignoring him. It was not, but it was just like, I'm here, you know. The child will find that response in themselves, right?
Yeah.
They will access that. And then second of all, when we're angry at them, you know, many psychologists will tell you, and psychiatrists or neuroscientists will tell you, we're just teaching them to get angry, right? We're just teaching them to yell and scream. And so, and I have to say with Rosy, it worked. It was incredible how it worked. It took about a month, I'd say, to like really convince her that I wasn't going to get angry at her and that I was on her team. But when she realized that, it like, she learned that quickly.
The way I saw us in our middle and upper middle class United States milieu in your book was, we do a lot of trying to pull our kids and push our kids.
Yes.
We're trying to control and correct. We're trying to make them do stuff. And it hasn't necessarily had great results. But what you learned was that children want to learn. They are very motivated to learn. They want to be seen and respected and valued as humans. They wouldn't articulate it that way because they're tiny children, but they want not to have their feelings escalated, but to be, you know, brought back down. They want to be respected. They want to know you're not leaving because there's a tantrum, right? They want that comfort and that connection.
Yeah.
But they also are really hungry to participate and learn and belong. And I, you know, in the work that I've excavated in writing my own, this notion of humans, you know, want to make things. We want to create, we want to help, we want to be a part of the, you know, accomplishing things. And what I got out of your book was, in our milieu, we are sitting kids down in front of enrichment videos or taking them off to some game we think they have to play to get into the right college. And instead, what really needs to happen is they need to be invited to participate in the work of the family, that somehow is developing a deep sense of belonging, confidence, the actual skills associated with whatever they're learning. And so instead of pushing or pulling, the communities you've studied seem to do sort of a much more subtle, like, we're making dinner now. The parent will announce it and kind of change their body, right? They'll nod and just walk to the kitchen and the kids follow. What is that? Like, how do you, because we're either yelling at our kids, have you done your homework? Why haven't you done this? You can't, you know, or we're overpraising. We have these two extremes, like, oh, you're so amazing. Thank you so much. Would you please mind if one day I asked you to help me out with the dishes? Like, all of this apologetic asking, constant chatter. And it sounds like you're saying less noise, a lot less noise, a lot more energy that's calm and signaling. So tell us about if your friend, the interpreter, was able to calm Rosy down by saying just with the kindest words about the sunset, Rosy, you know, what about when you want Rosy to get off her butt? Now that we know no longer, she's not in a tantrum, but we want some help over here, or it's time to go in the car. You know, how do you, what's the right way to get, we now know how to stop the tantrum, but how do you start the action that we're trying to nudge them toward?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that's been so helpful for me is that parents just take action, right? They don't ask kids a lot to leave, or if they ask them once, you know, or twice, and that's it. And then they just do things.
You mean in the cultures you've studied?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. They don't ask, they just do it.
They don't ask, right?
Just
and if they ask, they ask once. They just, you know, like, I remember one of the moms, Marie, we were going to go out to a hunting camp and on the ATV, and like, you know, she was kind of delayed and the kid didn't want to go, and she just walked out the door and waited on the ATV. And, you know, that was it. And then the kid came out and the kid didn't have the shoes on or something. And she was like, go get the shoes. And like, there was no fuss. It was just very like, I don't know. So I started taking action with Rosy a lot more, like out the front door too. It's like, she knows. I'm like, get your shoes, get your jacket, we're going. And I don't even need to say that. She knows she needs her shoes. She knows she needs her jacket, you know, and I walk out the door and she comes. I mean, sometimes you have to wait, but she comes.
But take us to the next step, because some parents are like, okay, fine, I'm on the ATV. We all want to envision ourselves on an all-terrain vehicle instead of whatever, you know. family car we're currently driving, right? So like you have set your expectation. We are leaving. You've
Yeah.
nodded with your head. You've left, you know, and
Yeah.
now you're in the vehicle, the all-terrain vehicle, the motor,
Yeah.
you know, whatever it is. And your kid is in the house. Like, don't we at some point have to then just like, all right, I got to go back in and get the kid. Like, what do you do? Do you leave? Do you like, if the kid doesn't come?
If the kid doesn't come, I mean, so I think, first of all, a lot of parents around the world would wait a lot longer than we do. You know, I was with a mine family getting the kids ready for school, 4 of them. And I had this tape. It's incredible tape. The kid wouldn't find their shoes, the little boy. He was 11, and she said, go find your shoes. And she said it like that, go find your shoes. That was it. Just no fuss, no muss. And then he leaves. And I think it's a good 10 minutes before he comes back, and he still doesn't have her shoes. And she just says, go find your shoes. And she says it again. And the same calmness. And then she waits again. I think she ends up saying it 3 times. I can't remember. But he eventually finds the shoes. And I reflect, like, I would, number one, be asking her twice, like within 30 seconds, go find your shoes. Wait, where you haven't gotten your shoes? When are you going to get your shoes? Right? Like this so I think that there is something about being more patient, like just because I think when we ask, go find your shoes, where are your shoes? We are modeling impatience and demandingness, right? That's all we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So one, I think it's just being a little bit more patient and confident in the kid. If the kid really didn't do it, the mom would go back, right? Unless there was another family member there, and then the mom would leave it with the other family member, right? I think there's a huge amount of that, right? That if another kid's there or somebody else is around, like what does the kid have to go, right? But if you have to go, yeah, I think the mom would go back and again, whatever she would do, I envision it would be much gentler and less, there'd be much less anger and emotion, right? That I think we've kind of tied into parenting a lot of emotion that doesn't need to be there, right? With the praise, there's a lot of emotion. Oh, that's amazing, right? Like this, whereas like that has a flip side. That has the anger or you're not pleased side, right? Like I was talking today where like, you know, parents criticize, like we've kind of erased criticism and faults a lot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents would say it is not as criticism, but guidance, because there's not this emotional aspect to it. Like, oh, you didn't make the tortilla quite right here. This is about, or I watched a father teach a young boy how to collect honey. And it was, and he was asking, oh, no, cut there, cut right. Okay. Yeah. Cut over there. And it was interpreted as guidance and help instead of as like, oh, I'm not doing it right. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a big, like, there's just too much emotion, right? Tied to parenting. They're just facts, right? You got to leave the house, you know?
In one of the communities, I can't remember which one, forgive me. The point was you discerned that kind of one of the overarching principles was a belief that the children just haven't learned it yet. If they're not doing it at all or correctly, they just haven't learned it yet. There's tremendous patience, plus the expectation that they can and will learn. And that as long as we keep modeling it, we keep doing that head nod and walking over to the kitchen around. I love that. I've been doing it in my own house. I'm going to confess. I've told you I have a 19 and 21-year-old. We've all been in here with the pandemic, and I've been trying to repattern some of the patterns that need to be repatterned in my household. And I've been trying the methods in this book. I'm telling you, y'all, this is the book I've been waiting for. It will change you. Okay. So the belief in kids is a profound respect for children, I found, and a trust and a faith that they might not know it yet. And maybe I wish they did, but these parents don't seem to exhibit even that impatience that we might have. Like, I'm going to keep tying your shoes because I can. Like sometimes we're that way, right? What's wrong with you? You can't tie your shoes. Well, they're only, they're a child. Of course you can tie shoes. You're a freaking grown up. And our kids will never learn if we don't slow it down, have patience, and say, you know what? It takes a child a long time to try and fail and try again at tying shoes. And we don't have time for them to learn and try and fail because we're in such a rush. And all of that turns out to be contributing to this culture where children lack autonomy because we're always there handling, nagging, reminding, scolding, or overhelping, and where they don't have a valuable connection. And here you point to the words of William Stixrud and Ned Johnson, who are an authorial pair here, written many books on parenting, but also I would add Jess Leahy and Dan Pink talk about this. You're talking about essentially what creates intrinsic motivation in kids to
Yes.
do stuff. These twin things, seemingly paradoxical, of kids need autonomy and connection. Well, how do you do,
That's
what's
right.
that? How do you
Yeah.
have both autonomy and connection?
Yeah, it's a great point. And it's something that a researcher just published a piece on with the hunter-gatherer group. And it's so interesting, right? And the way I think a lot of parents around the world do it is the child is allowed to make decisions like moment to moment. And that's the autonomy aspect. But they are also expected and taught, and there's a way that you can do it. You teach the child to be helpful and contributing and respectful and sharing at the same time. So one of the things the parents do, and I saw this everywhere, I think you could see this like 99% of cultures in the world, is that children are always integrated into every task and they are expected to contribute. And so, for instance, when we were with the Hadzabe, I saw this, it was incredible. Like every time we went somewhere, we were with this little girl, Bailey. I think she's about 5. The mom or the grandparents would hand her something to carry. So we're going to the river to get water. They'd hand her a smaller bottle and she would carry it. You know, we're going out to get firewood. She would be handed a kid. They put a kid on her back, you know. I had to carry a kid. It's like, they hand me a kid. It's like, you're here, you're going to help. Right.
Kid, you're saying a child.
A child. Yes.
Okay. I thought you were saying kit, K-I-T. Okay.
No, sorry. A kid.
Like
you
you
will
carry this child. I will carry this
I was
child.
handed a baby. Like, you're coming along, you're helping, you know? And she's been taught to constantly think back to the group and share. So when we got that water at the river, she went off voluntarily up this cliff and got a bowl full of baobab seeds. And this was our lunch. And she got it. And actually, when we got back, they were like grounding the baobab seeds, and her grandmother needed a tool. And she said, Bailey, go get me a tool. So what one researcher has counted them in one group that there's about 3 subtasks given per hour. So the parent and these aren't like, go clean the kitchen or go do the dishes, go make your bed. These are, we're going to all make the bed, come over here and hold the sheet, right? These are like very small subtasks of what you're doing, of what the adult is doing. And so you're bringing the child into the task. You're also teaching the child the skill, right? To how to make the bed, how to do the dishes. And you're teaching the child to be helpful. You're teaching them to look out for what's needed and to jump in and help. And this one thing has been huge in our family, both for the children and the adults, for teaching helpfulness. Right? That like doing the dishes is not me in there doing the dishes or nagging someone to go do it. It's all 3 of us, me, Rosy, and my husband, in there doing the dishes together. And we each have subtasks that we're doing, right? And then it gets done faster and it's easier. And there's not this like conflict around it, right? It's a shared responsibility.
You're listening to Michaeleen Doucleff, an incredible journalist who's written an incredible book, Hunt, Gather, Parent. She's also an incredible parent. And whether your child is 5 or 21, as both of us can attest, if you start to create an expectation that kids will be a part of creating all the stuff the household has to have happen,
That's
and
right.
You invite with a smile, with the expectation that they will join, and you nod your head a little bit and just start doing it, they will do it. I've seen this magic play out in my own house. I could talk to you for hours, but the audience wants to ask questions. So I have the pleasure now of going to the Q&A. So let's go. You ready? Question 1 is from Margaret Edmonds. Thank you, all caps, for this book. I was so fortunate to hear on Morning Edition. Immediately pre-ordered the book, have devoured it, already seeing changes in my kids, she says. I've never felt this way about a parenting book before. Did you have any qualms about the level of detail you put in the book about your family and especially your relationship with your daughter? It's so necessary for the book, but I admire your bravery. This is that memoir, personal narrative aspect of the book I was alluding to earlier.
Which I didn't answer. Qualms, sure. It was definitely very thought out, I will say. But it's one of those things that if I'm going to look at other families and other people, how they do it, it's like, I have to look at myself. Right. And I think at the end of the day, this book is about looking at ourselves. It's about looking at our culture from, if we open. So one of the things we haven't said, which I think is really important to say, is parenting advice today is very narrow-minded, right? It comes from a very, very narrow perspective, almost entirely a Western perspective. And I think that that's one of the problems, is that we're missing so much of the good information out there And I think once we see that other information, it makes our lives look a little bit different, and we can see our lives in it through a different lens. And so that's how I felt with my own parenting. The only way I could really learn was to first really inspect my relationship with Rosy. But I guess the proof will be in the pudding. I don't know. I think it's okay. I think how I talk about Rosy in the book, I love her, and it's all about wanting to be the best mom I can be for her. It really is.
Yeah, it comes through. And look, a reader is going to feel so much more seen, held, and heard if you're able to share stories and say, look, I'm right there in it with you. My kid's having a tantrum. I'm yelling. I mean, none of us is perfect by a long shot. And I think being vulnerable on the page, as we memoirists do, and narrative journalists, I happen to believe it's extremely valuable. It certainly, I think, took the book to a whole other level. Let's go to question 2 from Stuart Callahan, who wants to know, how might the public tantrums look differently in an American culture versus the cultures you witnessed?
I think the big difference is the parents' responses, right? For one, it's a collective response, right? There isn't this like, oh, that mom has to do it by herself and fix that over there, right? That everyone there is in there to help, right? And I also think that the children are given a little bit more space, like I said, to be upset. I kind of think of it as emotional autonomy, right? There's not this jump on the child to fix it and change it right now, right? The child is allowed to be upset, right? Which I feel like when we have public tantrums, at least me, I felt like Rosy has public tantrums. I want to fix it right away, take it away. But I think that there's this, because of what you said, Julie, right? That there's this expectation that children are going to have tantrums, that toddlers have tantrums. So why would you be upset about it? Why would you need to fix it? Because this is just what they do. And if you're just there calmly, they will calm down. If that answers the question.
Yeah, nice. Okay, this question is from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. Thank you for bringing your analytical training and open heart to this work. How do you train yourself to use the approach that Elizabeth taught you while watching the sunset, beyond pausing for a moment? And
this
then
is a great question.
Congratulations to you on so many levels.
This is such a good question, because actually this comes from Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is a neuroscientist at, I think, Northwestern. But what Elizabeth was doing is this incredibly sophisticated psychological tool where she's replacing Rosy's anger, helping Rosy replace her anger with awe. So Elizabeth Feldman Barrett has written amazing books about emotion and how emotions are kind of like muscles in your brain that you can flex. So if you constantly react to things with anger, that muscle gets strengthened, and it's very easy to react to things with anger. But if you practice reacting to things with awe or gratitude, like, oh, look at the sunset, or so she said, like, she used to get mad on Zoom calls because the reception wouldn't be good. And so what she would do is she would practice feeling, wow, isn't this amazing that I could talk to this person who's all the way in Washington, DC, or all the way, right? And she says that once you have an emotion, once you're angry, it is incredibly difficult to stop it. And that we're asking children to do this incredibly difficult thing that we often can't do, right? Stop our anger. She says, but if you practice having a different motion when you're not angry, so when you're outside walking and you see the butterfly, oh, wow, look how beautiful this butterfly is. Then when you're upset or something bad happens, you're more able to tap into these positive emotions, the awe, the gratitude. And so Rosy and I practice awe all the time. We go outside, even though we live in the city, we go outside and look at the plum flowers have just bloomed on the tree. Look how beautiful they're incredible, right? And we practice this so that when, something bad happens, and she's upset, she can quickly access that emotion. I can quickly access that emotion. It's a great question. That Lisa believes that people's emotions are made when they're not in those hot button moments. They are built in other times, and it depends on what we use. And it works. Like, if you keep practicing awe and gratitude, you will be able to tap into that when you're upset much more easily.
You know, we actually have Ned Johnson here. I just
Oh my
alluded to him a couple
gosh.
minutes ago, co-author of The Self-Driven Child. And he's got a question. First, he's glad to be here. Your point about parents being more patient with and not putting unneeded emotion into parenting. How do you think parents in other cultures find it easier to do that? Are they more egalitarian societies? Is there more social support, i.e. we're all in this together for parents? What allows parents to be regulating their own emotions enough to show up with this patience and not putting all this unnecessary emotion out there into the lives of children? Thanks, Ned.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of it is what we value. I think that we've come in the last 20 years, maybe, to value this very high energy, very emotional way of parenting. Oh my God, good job. Oh, let's, this like, and on the flip side of that, I think we also value anger. We think that anger is a very productive, people, there's a Stanford researcher that's done studies on this, looking, I think, mostly at Eastern Asian, maybe Taiwanese, what level of, like, whether it's high energy or low energy, what cultures value. And Western culture values this like high energy, whether it's good or bad. And I think in a lot of other cultures, they value the low energy. The peaceful moments are just as nice and enjoyable, and with your kids, as these like high energy, now we're partying, oh, party dance type of thing, and so I have grown to devalue anger. I really have, and to feel like it is not the productive way to deal with Rosy. It's not a productive way to deal with my husband. And by devaluing it, this also is, psychologists have told me, you turn to it less. Yeah. Right? You are much less likely to get angry if you say, well, the repercussions of this are not going to be so good.
Yeah. In my work, I explore the extent to which our own egos as parents are getting in the way. So we're embarrassed, like your kid is having the tantrum on the tarmac, and we're embarrassed because that makes me look bad. My kid is right. Or we need these outcomes. We need our kid to get to a certain school or a certain profession, and we say it's because we just want them to be successful. But for many of us, there's like, I need them to have that outcome so people will, think well of me. Ego. What goals did these parents have in mind? What were they hoping their kids would succeed, would achieve? And what did that have to do with their own egos that you were able to discern? It's a really good
question. I talked to several of my moms about this, and they had, big hopes and dreams for their children. Like, one mom wanted the little boy to be a doctor, and, but it's a very interesting question, Julie. You probably can answer this better than me. But I definitely didn't get this sense that a child's behavior was like representative of the parent. And I think this must be a pretty new phenomenon, right? That, I mean, it's what a burden on a child.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? I mean,
amen. Absolutely. Let's go to a question from Momo Ridley. Momo Ridley says, I'm Thai, and it seems like even when the older generation is wrong, it is still taboo for the youth to refuse to obey whatever irrational directive. What dynamics between older and younger generations in some cultures leads to more yelling and authoritarian postures from parent to child?
Oh, interesting. I'm not sure I understand exactly the question.
Yeah, I've screwed it up. I read it in the reverse order. So let's talk about older and younger generations and the dynamics between them. In some cultures, those dynamics lead to more yelling and authoritarian postures from the parent to the child. And Momo says they're Thai, from Thailand. And it seems like even when the older generation is wrong, it's still taboo for the youth to refuse to obey an irrational directive. So that power dynamic, that authoritarian power dynamic.
What I observed and experiences I've had is that there is a lot more respect for the older generation, right? I mean, David Lancy has documented this a lot, that we are this like very child-centric world, right? Where the child is kind of the center, whereas in many cultures around the world, it's the opposite, right? The older generation is valued for their wisdom and their knowledge. And from what I could see, that that was taught, children were taught that like very early on by modeling and practicing. I didn't see, I mean, the places that we went to, violence and yelling is very taboo and very, it's kind of the last resort. And so I saw incredibly small amounts of that. Of course, that varies, but in general, in many hunter-gatherer communities, conflict and violence is a last resort and highly devalued, especially towards a child.
Let's talk about an extreme situation. This question comes from another anonymous audience member. What do you do when your child is doing something like running away from you on a busy street or putting themselves in a truly dangerous situation? What did you observe and how does that translate to here?
Yeah. So absolutely, if the child is in a dangerous situation, the parent acts. There's no doubt, right? I think the difference is that a lot of the children have been taught preemptively where these sticky situations are. So I talk about in the book the use of stories, which is again incredibly cross-cultural. Like I say, like I dare you to find a culture that hasn't done this, but where like so stories of the water monster, right? So in actually these stories are actually incredibly similar across cultures that live near water or have water elements. But this idea that if you go into the water, a monster will come and take you down into the water and take you away. And these stories are taught very early on. And so that the child learns very early about the dangers. And so the parent is not helicoptering, but the parent is watching. And I think this is key. I think that it is not free range in the sense that the children are doing whatever. There is always somebody watching children very carefully. They're just not interfering with the child. I have a lot of stories with this where I didn't realize a parent was watching me and Rosy, and then we got ourselves into what they thought was a dangerous situation and they appeared. So one time we were in this cenote and this older Mayan mother had followed us out. We were with a bunch of teenagers and kind of 20-year-olds, and we were swimming and Rosy had on a life jacket and then she took it off and we were getting ready to leave. And I kind of turned my back on Rosy and this woman came back. She was watching. She came over and grabbed Rosy's hand and said, you know, this is dangerous. And she told me like, this was dangerous for me to turn my back on her. And so she had been watching very carefully, but not involved until she saw that moment where it was like, this is, you know, we've crossed a line and we have to, it was an incredible moment because I didn't really know she was there even.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I'm going to combine two questions, one from Jennifer and one from your friend, Laura Seidel, I think. Both of these are about how does this work depending on the age of the child? Jennifer said, do you focus on certain ages in the book or childhood in general? Laura says, how well do you think these methods might work with, say, a 16-year-old versus a smaller child? So the applicability of all of this to kids depending on the age.
You know, the book is written for a lot of ages. And I think all of these methods work with all ages. And like I joke, the methods have worked really well with my husband. I mean, really well with my husband. Like, I mean, the helpfulness in the house has like skyrocketed. You just have to be patient. A little bit older, you have to like, one of the psychologists told me, you have to wean them a little bit. And you have to have less control, right? Less hands-on. Yeah. It's got to be them. But you can wear them down.
Well, and as I've said, I read this book. My kids were probably, they were both 19 and 21 at the time. And I immediately began deploying tactics in my own kitchen, my own family room that I got from your book. So I frankly think this is about how it's a human operation manual. Some cultures manage to be teaching this from the get-go, and others of us are learning it late. But frankly, I think this is about how to interpret and work with and help all humans on their path. Let me turn to education now. We have a teacher here. Jennifer Dodson, good evening. I'm an educator in DC, so I'm interested in how what you found can be applied in the classroom. I'm already hearing some things I can do, which is awesome.
Oh, I'd like her to tell me what. This is a great question. I mean, I think it goes back to what you talk about with intrinsic motivation. Let me give you a story. I think it's better. So I actually saw a Maya class. It was a hieroglyphic class that a person was teaching 8-9-year-olds hieroglyphics. And it at the time I didn't realize the power of it, but the kids came, they all came voluntarily. Nobody was dropping them off. They all walked there, rode their bikes, and they sat down outside. And the instructor handed them like a key for the hieroglyphs. And he said, now we're going to write our names. And he passed them around, and that's it. And then, and that was the instruction. He was like, now you're going to write your names. And that was really it. It was incredible. And then he walked around and responded to any needs the children had. But it was this incredible, like, here are the tools you need. Now do it. And that's really what a lot of the learning is there. It's like the parent is there to provide some tools, but then the child is going to learn and explore and figure it out. And then the parent is, or the teacher is there to respond, right? To guide and respond. But the route that the child takes is the child's choosing. And does that make any sense? I mean, it's kind of crazy, but then I actually saw it again, where somebody was helping Rosy do something, and we had an activity night, and it was the same. The parent just gave kind of the resources, and then they kind of sat there and was like, no, now you do it. And like, of course, the kid had questions or whatever, but it was very driven from the child, right? Instead of from that direction.
Child-centric learning, child-led learning. Okay.
Yeah.
There are a lot of educational pedagogies that center around those things. We've got very little time left. So let me, before I go to the last question here, because I think that question from the teacher prompts what I'm about to say, which is, say folks want to follow up and learn more, dive more into this with you, or where can people find you? And are you doing any workshops? It sounds like you have a discussion group somewhere that people can join.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're focused on, getting the book out. If anyone's interested in me coming on like a parenting group, like with our a lot of cities have Facebook parenting groups, I'm happy to come and talk about that. You can find me on Twitter at Foodie Science, but you can also email me, mdoucleff@npr.org. I love to get email, and but I would love to come and help, or just talk about, just commiserate and answer questions about things.
Cool. And our last question from Amy Hare, who writes, this is really sort of going back to what you're saying, but your husband has changed a little bit too. Many of us are raising children with another person, with a partner, or an entire group of people, who knows. While Rosy is probably too young to reflect on these changes to your family dynamics, I wonder if there are areas where you and your husband have had different experiences in implementing the learnings, different responses to the outcomes.
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think the problem is I had to learn them first, and then I had to teach him. I think he's been surprised at how much they've worked, and how much, I think especially early on, how much they decreased the conflict in our house. And he was very excited about that. I think he was a little skeptical at first about him implementing a lot of the ideas, but in the last couple of months, he's gone full out with this book and the ideas and the things I see and him do, and how it connects him and Rosy. I mean, this, at the end of the day, this book is about building a connection with your child, right? Instead of tension and conflict, building connection and communication. And once he's really embraced the ideas, it's been really beautiful to see. But like I said, like our relationship is better because we're not in conflict, right? I mean, you're right. Like the methods in the book work with just humans, right? It's about collaborating with learning to collaborate, really.
That's right. I'm going to turn things back over to Heidi and Margaret, but I just want to thank you and say you are really onto something here with this fantastic new book, Hunt, Gather, Parent. I'm saying you're really onto something. What I really mean is the Mayans and the Inuits and the Hadzabe people are onto something, as are so many other cultures around the world. Time will tell whether mainstream American parents will heed this wisdom, but I certainly believe that we fail to heed this wisdom at our peril. Thank you, Michaeleen Doucleff and Politics and Prose. This hour has flown by. Thanks to everyone who was listening.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Michaeleen and Julie, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I know that a lot of people are listening. We had a lot of great questions. We didn't get to everything, but thank you all for your wonderful contributions, and thank you for your insights, both of you. Wonderful. We are putting more information in the chat about both Michaeleen and Julie's books, so please look there and buy these great books, support these authors, and you can follow us on social media, and please join us for future events, parenting events, and other things that we're doing here in the Children and Teens Department. You can follow us on social media, and everyone, please stay safe out there and keep reading widely. Thank you all so much for being here.